Hey, casual tutorial time. So people have been saying that they want POV camera angles, which would give you a better idea of what's happening between the hands and would make it easier to learn. And so that's what I'm here to do. Anyway, so today we're going to learn how to make one of these. It's a knitted stuffy. And so it'll take a few videos for us to explain how to do the whole thing. But today we're going to talk about the materials you're going to need. And we will also learn how to do the basic cast on and the basic knit stitch. And then from there, we should, over the course of the next few videos, explain how to do everything else. So anyway, first let's do a bit of an overview on the materials we're going to need. So clearly, since we're knitting, we're going to need this base color of yarn. We'll talk more about that later, and you're going to need needles. Right? We'll talk a little bit more about what needles you need later. Then in addition to that, you're going to need some sort of filler. I use a polyfill, a polyester sort of fiber filling, which is nice because it holds its shape pretty well and it squishes and it's nice and cute. You can just give it a nice little hug. So that's works pretty well. If you're opposed to using that sort of thing, there are, I think, woolen and cotton fills that you can use. What I don't recommend is using the beads. Like there are bead fillers that people sell. Those will just fall through the holes and it won't work very well. So you want something sort of fibery and fluffy. That'll work the best. Then for the exterior, you're going to want some kind of decorations. I have little plastic buttons for eyes. Well, they're big buttons for eyes, but anyway. And I also use a contrasting color of yarn for the bow and for the mouth. When it comes to the decorations, you can be creative. You can put whatever you want on the outside. So think about that as you're working through the project, and I'm sure you'll come up with something super cute. But anyway, now let's talk a little bit about what sort of yarn and needles we need. So for something about this size and with this texture, you're going to want a medium or worsted weight yarn. This is the particular brand that I used. It doesn't really matter. As far as material goes, this is acrylic. It's basically a plastic and it works, I think, pretty well for this sort of thing. Also, typically, acrylic fabrics are easier to clean, whereas if it's wool, you don't really want to get it wet so much. Or at least you don't want to wash it because it'll have different behaviors. So acrylic is sort of the simplest thing to use, and medium weight is good for something like this. You could go smaller or you could go bigger. That would basically change how big the texture is. But if you're going much bigger than a worsted weight, then you'd probably want to scale up and do a much bigger doll. But anyway, now that we've chosen our yarn, we've chosen this nice vibrant green color, we now need to think about what kind of needles we're using, particularly what size of needles. Typically on a ball like this, they'll give you some recommendation on what size you want to use, and it'll give you some information about what the gauge would be. That is to say, sort of how dense your stitches will be. So what you'll notice here is that it says with knitting needles, you're going to get about 18 stitches by 24 rows in 4 inches using size 8 needles. Okay? You shouldn't take that too literally. The important thing is that your actual gauge will depend a lot on how much tension you're holding in your yarn. If you hold your yarn like really tight, then you're going to end up with a lot more stitches per inch. Whereas if you hold it looser and you weave your fabric more loosely, then you're going to have fewer stitches per inch. And so that will depend a lot on you. But also, when you're building one of these stuffies, you want the holes to be as small as possible because you don't want to see through to the white fill. You can see I have a few holes in there, but it's mostly not too bad. But in order to get those holes smaller, you'll want to work with needles that are smaller than recommended. So here where they recommend using size 8 needles, I would recommend going 1 or 2 sizes down. A size 7 or 6 needle would be better for using this yarn to make a plushie like this. If I recall correctly, I think I used size 7 needles for this, and it turned out fine. So consider that when you're choosing needles. As well, since we're working on a round tube here, there are a few different ways that you can do it. I recommend using what's called circular needles. They have tips which can be either wood or aluminum or plastic, and then they have this plastic string between the two of them holding them together. In future videos we'll explain what techniques you need to use in order to make this work, but basically using this loop allows you to knit and then move all of the yarn to the other needle and keep knitting. Alright, so that's that's the main reason why you want to be using this. Another way is using double pointed needles, which I think are a little unruly, so I don't like double pointed needles, but that is another option if that's something you prefer. So anyway, since we talked a bit about gauge, I think probably the first step you want to do when you're making a project like this is to make a gauge swatch, because you'll have some idea of what sort of circumference you want, and you want to know how many stitches you need to end up having around in order for you to get the circumference you want. Right? And the only way to do that is to start knitting and see how many stitches you end up using. Right? So that's what we're going to do. Usually when you're starting to do the cast off for something like this, you would start with a very small number of stitches, like maybe you would cast on 6 stitches and then you would increase as you go out. But for the gauge swatch, we'll use more stitches. So since on the package it says that it's about 18 stitches for 4 inches, I think a 4-inch swatch makes about sense. So let's just round that up a bit. Let's go up to, let's do 24 stitches. And so in order to do that, we're going to have to cast on. I use the long tail cast on, which is called long tail cast on because it has a long tail. The way you do it is get your working end of your yarn coming out. Now what you're going to want to do is take the dead end, drape it over your thumb, drape the working end over your index, and then pull them both down. You want to pull down enough of your yarn on the dead side so you can work with it. There, just it doesn't matter exactly how long, especially for this project, because you're only going to be doing 6 stitches, but make sure it's long, and you know, yarn's cheap, it's not really that big a deal. Okay, and now we're going to be doing the cast off. Well, sorry, cast on. So first, the way I do it is once I get this shape, stick the needle under here, grab with the thumb, and then this is the part that's interesting, okay? So you go under this side here. So again, you pick this up, then you grab the yarn here and pull it through, and then you cinch it tight. Okay, and you see you have 2 stitches there. Then do it again. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see you have all those stitches there. I think I said let's go to 24, so let's go all the way to 24. So that's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. It's getting a little unruly. 19, 20. Since I'm pretty much out of yarn, let's just end it at 20. Yeah, I should have made my tail longer, but Again, when you're working on the project, your tail doesn't actually need to be that long because you're only going to be casting on 6 stitches. Okay, and now we're going to learn how to knit. Basically, there's 2 main ways to hold the yarn. You can either hold it in your well, in my case, it's my right hand, basically in your working hand, or you can hold it in your opposite hand. I hold it here in my opposite hand. I basically regulate the tension by adjusting the way I'm holding it with my hands. This isn't super efficient, but it's the way I do it. I haven't found any problem with it, so that's what we're going to do. So anyway, now let's learn how to do the basic knit stitch. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to, with the yarn coming off of the back, so not from the front, you want the yarn coming off of the back, you stick the needle into the loop, going the same direction as the needle that it starts on, there. Then basically the way I think of it is that you're grabbing the yarn and pulling it through. Okay, so that's the way I think about it. So grab the yarn, pull it through. Grab the yarn, pull it through, just like that. Yeah, I'm not great. Sometimes I get a little stuck, but that's the idea. Again, stick it through, so they're going in the same direction with the needle you're inserting going behind the needle that it starts on. Sorry, just gonna pull myself some yarn. Right? Then basically you get the yarn that you're working with between your needles, and then you use the needle in your working hand, sorry, to pull that through. So you end up with the loop on your working needle like that. All right, so again, stick it in, grab there. Oops. Again, it's kind of hard to knit with the camera in front of my face. Yeah, maybe the whole POV thing just isn't really for me. No, well. Wait, why we're oops. We're almost done. We just have 2 more to do. And last one. All right. Not quite. There we are. Again, I'm pretty sloppy. I'm not great at knitting, but you know, it's enough to get it done. So anyway, then what you do is after you do all of that, what you do is if you're knitting in the round, then there isn't really going to be an end. You're going to just bring the whole thing over and then keep knitting in the same direction again. But if you're knitting flat, you take this, you turn this needle around, and then you can work again going in this direction. So again, same deal, make sure the yarn is coming out from the back rather than from the front. You can stick that in, and like that. Again, keep going, and again, if you're new to knitting and you want to sort of troubleshoot to make sure that you're not messing up too horribly, you can count your stitches in each row to make sure that you're not adding or losing stitches. Actually, for doing the final stuffy project, you are going to end up intentionally increasing and decreasing the number of stitches per row. But it's something that you want to make sure you're doing deliberately. If you end up accidentally adding stitches, that is not an ideal situation. So that is something to be aware of. All right. So again, that was our cast on and then 2 rows. what I would recommend doing is basically doing that for about, say, you don't need to go too far. Let's say maybe 15 or 20 rows, and then that'll give you a piece of fabric to give you an idea of what sort of size this fabric is going to be. And so if you end up with, let's say that this was 20 inches, oh no, it was 20 stitches, let's say you end up with 4 inches across, and that means you're doing about 5 stitches per inch. And so when you're deciding how many stitches you need for your stuffy, you're going to want to figure out what sort of circumference you want in inches, and then multiply that by 5. As well, you'd want to round that to, I would say, probably the nearest, multiple of 4, just because that's going to be a little easier for us to work with as far as the math goes for the decreases. But yeah, anyway, so hopefully now you have a basic idea of how to get your knitting started, and we went over the materials. In the next video, we are going to talk about how to start the bottom, and we'll also talk about the basic stitches for the increases. Anyway, if you have been, thanks for watching, and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and keep things green.